Okay, after a quick pass across a 6-inch buff with ZAM, 6-inch cotton buff, and an inside ring buff. I'm liking the way this is polishing up. That's a good initial first polish. And the good news is I can't see any fire stain anywhere. Fire stain doesn't really show up until you get a decent polish on the piece. And it generally shows up as a gray spot, and it's usually just below the surface. But if you've done a good job of protecting it with flux and using a reducing flame, you pretty much reduce the amount of, or the likelihood that you will create any kind of a fire stain or end up with fire scale. And this one's pretty clean. I'm liking it. I don't see anything anywhere that looks like it has any damage. So let's move on to setting the stone. Let's bring out the setter's block. Okay, we got one more piece here that I'd like to use for this. That is this little piece of dowel that I haven't cut it in half. I've cut it into a little less than half, and it doesn't quite fit this one. I think I've got another one here. It's a little bit smaller. Somewhere. There it is. Keep a lot of these little pieces of wood around. This one's actually cut on the end, and let's see, yeah, that'll get us well below the point where we're going to catch anything that is not just straight shank. So we can actually run that down and be able to tighten it up quite well. I get out my setter's block accessories here. And probably the only thing I'm going to need out of this is my wrench. Let's open this up. Set the piece down in there. Kind of line it up in the middle. And let's just make sure we're not catching anything. That looks good there. Looks good there. And hold that down. And give that a good squeeze. Okay, that is not going to move now. Set that aside. And let's give this a pinch with some pretty fine sawdust. This is actually poplar, and it's a hardwood, but in real fine sawdust form, it does hold up well. It's got nice springy quality to it. I try to avoid anything like pine or pitch, anything that has turpentine or pitch in it. That can be a little bit sticky, and once it gets pressed down, it kind of just stays there. It doesn't really bounce back up. And I'm looking for something that's actually going to cause the stone to bounce back up. So let's put our stone in our little stirrup here, where we have our dental floss. There we go. That kind of held in place there, and we'll try to find the spot where this seemed like it wanted to actually sit, and it was right there. Oh, jump back up. Let's get that. Sit down square. Now it's a little bit high on this side. There it is. I think down square. So right there. So mark this little spot right here on this end. Take it back out and actually reorient it right back into the same position. Let's do that. Put that in and orient it and push it down. While holding that down, I want to get any sawdust that came up around the edge here. I want to go ahead and get that out of the way. So we'll hold it down with this and then close our eyes and blow. Alright, and I've got even gap all the way around. That looks good. Let's go ahead and set this stone. Let me grab my bezel pusher here. And thing to learn to keep in mind about your bezel pusher is a polished surface will impart a polished surface. So you need to keep your burnishers, your bezel pushers, all of them that are going to be contacting the bezel, you want them to have a high polish. And let's begin here. I'm going to hold it down with my thumb here, and I'm going to come in at this point and just kind of roll that in until it just almost touches the stone. We'll come in from the other side, and we'll just work in quarters here. This setter's ball is really handy. This is a great tool to have around. Okay, I've got the most gap here, so I'm going to move around there. I'm going to try and press that gap out of there. I'll move to the opposite side. Pull that in. Just keep working those opposite corners. Okay. Now we just find the high spots. And at this point, you kind of want to push down on your stone again. Hold it in place. And roll in there. Around to the opposite side. And we're just trying to spread the metal across and compress it down without getting any wrinkles. So that's when it's important that you have the correct stone, the stone has the correct shape, and that your bezel height is correct. If you've got too tall a bezel, your bezel will never push down without actually squeezing all of the metal in and compressing it into that smaller shape. So it's a combination of a well-cut stone and a proper bezel height that makes for a good setting. Just kind of rock that back and forth, kind of spreading the metal to either side of it there. And just keep working those gaps as they appear. As you push on one side, you'll see gaps open up on either side of it. So you just keep working those gaps. And the stone is actually being pushed down into the sawdust a little bit, and then it's springing back up. So I'm able to overbend the metal a little bit. That way when the metal bounces back, the stone comes up to actually take up that space. So it's almost like having a spring under the stone. I'm kind of bracing my edge of my bezel pusher here so that I don't slip. You don't want to ding the ring or the stone. Okay, not seeing a lot of gap now. Maybe just a little bit on this side. Roll that around. Opened up a little bit on this end when I pushed there, so just kind of Push back towards that. Still got a little bit here. We're just working that top half of the bezel there. And this may be a little bit easier if you use fine silver, but I don't generally use fine silver unless I'm working with a really soft stone, maybe with opal, amber, coral, stones like that. They can benefit from using fine silver, but for the most part I like to make my bezels out of sterling silver. I can actually push down pretty hard on sterling silver. And okay, our stone is actually seated already, and I haven't even finished putting the bezel in. So now I'm going to switch. We're going to actually start to push down on the top edge of the bezel, and I'm going to actually start to roll the top edge of the bezel down closer to the stone. So we're going to go around this way and actually put the bezel almost straight up and down. We'll come in at a little bit of an angle, and same thing, we'll work our way back and forth around. Kind of roll a little bit at a time here. And here again, this is important. It's important to have a nice polish on your bezel pusher. If it's rough and you put it this close to the stone and you're pushing down, you might actually scratch your stone. On a stone that's got a nice polish, that's a tragic event, because it's not coming back out of there, and it's not like you can clean it up. So you're just kind of stuck with it at that point. But if you're careful and you've got a nice polish on your bezel pusher, then you should be okay. And I can see that gap, the little bit of gap that is left there. I can see it starting to close up very nicely now. And I'm just doing a little bit at a time. Now we can actually start just working our way around. We don't have to cross back and forth. Just move forward a little bit, give it a squeeze and roll. And then we'll do a final step on it here. Yeah, that stone's nice and tight. I'm pretty much done everything I can with the bezel pusher at this point. So we will switch to our burnisher. As you can see, it's got a nice polish on it. It's highly polished, and I've taken the sharp end off of this and actually put a kind of a blunt edge on there. It's not exactly flat. It's still got a little bit of a curve, but it's blunted a little bit so that I can actually put it right against the stone and roll it, and it doesn't actually dig into the stone. Let's orient this so we can actually get this in here. And at this point, you kind of brace and just do 3 or 4 millimeters at a time. And the trick here is to make sure that you press evenly all the way around. And what this does is upsets the edge of the bezel a little bit. And there you see I slipped a little bit, so I've got a little bit of a ding there. We'll go ahead and smooth that out. Kind of push the metal around a little bit. This upsets the edge of the metal and actually thickens it a little bit. And finishes the job we started earlier of rolling that top edge down against the stone. And this should seal up nicely. It's not a watertight seal, but it does look better. Okay, that stone is set. One thing you can do is just go around the top edge here a little bit, around the outside, and give it a little bit of a smoothing there. And a little bit of something I wanted to talk about on this stone. This is probably about the softest stone I would consider setting in a ring. Rings have a really hard life, and if you put the wrong stone in a ring, you can wind up with a ring that will not actually wear very long, and it'll have, the stone will become scratched, it'll get dings, it'll start to look well, kind of long in the tooth. Charoite is a 5/6. That's about the softest I like to put in. Now some stones are 5/6, but they've got really good cleavage and they tend to break easily. Charoite has a pretty good toughness because of the structure of the stone. It actually doesn't have cleavage in any one direction very good, so it's just on the cusp of not being suitable for rings, but still being suitable. Now, I wouldn't put in a very large stone that was very thin. As you can see from this stone, it's fairly chunky and thick, and it's got the rounded shape. A hemispherical shape like this is one of the strongest shapes there is. So the shape is going to help it withstand knocks and bangs and other things that can occur to it. So Charoite's the minimum, but it's still suitable for rings if it's got the right shape. It's a good grade of Charoite. This is AA Charoite. There is a AAA, and the AAA would have a little darker purple color to it. It would have the same structure, this swirly structure that's in this one, but it would have a little darker purple that is actually a little more translucent. It pops really well. AAA Charoite is getting really hard to find, and when you do find it, it's quite expensive. But that's the disadvantage of using a stone that's really only mined in one place in the entire world, and that's in Siberia. So getting it out of Russia is problematic, and the fact that it's only mined in one place also makes it more problematic. So this ring is ready for final polishing, and I think we are just about done with it. I'll put the final polishing on it, and we will call this one good. Thanks for joining me.